on the website for those who missed the session or want to watch it again. Si necesita ayuda en español, por favor envíe un correo electrónico a studentassignment at wcpss.net y alguien se comunicará con usted mañana. This evening's session will focus on recommendations throughout the district that are related to school choice options, including recommendations in Southeast Raleigh, Northwest Raleigh, and Northeast Raleigh. As a reminder, today's session was prepared by the Office of Student Assignment, and the information we will review with you this evening is a subset of the full presentation that was shared with the board during their work session on September 3rd. Again, this evening's session will focus on recommendations throughout the district that are related to school choice options, including recommendations in Southeast Raleigh, Northwest Raleigh, and Northeast Raleigh. Otra vez, si necesita ayuda en español, por favor envíe un correo electrónico a studentassignment at wcpss.net y alguien se comunicará con usted mañana. Before we begin, let me go over some logistics. Our session will last for no more than an hour and a half. We will begin with a presentation and conclude by responding to questions from today's session. We recognize that now and throughout the session, you may have questions regarding the proposal or the recommended stability rules. To capture your questions, we will be using the Q&A feature within Google Meet. To access this feature from a computer, please click on the three shapes in the toolbar on your screen. If you are using a mobile device, select the three dots first, then select the icon with the three shapes. You should then see a Q&A feature identified by a question mark icon. To ensure your questions are anonymous, our host and moderators will be monitoring the Q&A session for questions and capturing them throughout this evening's session. Once you see that your question has been removed from the Q&A, that means that your question has been successfully captured by our moderators and you do not need to resubmit your question. We will make every effort to respond to your questions toward the end of our session. In addition, we will use your questions to update the FAQ portion of our website. Si necesita ayuda en español, por favor envíe un correo electrónico a studentassignment at wcpss.net y alguien se comunicará con usted mañana. In addition, we are asking that you contribute to the larger community discussion related to this initial draft of the 2025-26 school enrollment proposal via Thought Exchange. The Thought Exchange will remain open through September 29th. After it is closed, we will summarize the feedback received through the Thought Exchange and will share this summary with the board during their work session on October 15th. No one will be personally identified in the summary. Before I turn things over to Susan, we would like to remind you that today's session will focus on recommendations throughout the district that are related to school choice options, including recommendations in Southeast Raleigh, Northwest Raleigh, and Northeast Raleigh. By the end of this evening's session, you will have had an opportunity to review the assignment planning process, review recommendations included in the initial draft specific to your area of the district, share thoughts and ideas via Thought Exchange for review and consideration by both staff and board members, and perhaps most importantly, share questions you have that will help you gain a better understanding of the potential impacts of the proposed plan for your family. And now, I will turn things over to Susan.
Eric, thank you for your congenial welcome to all of us and for getting everyone set up so that they understand how to post their questions throughout today's session. Again, thank all of you for taking some time out of your busy schedules to join us for some important information that may impact you or your students in the future. To provide some context, on September 3rd, staff members presented the initial draft of a new student enrollment proposal to the Board of Education during a work session. The draft includes proposed school assignment changes for the 2025-2026 school year. This year's student assignment proposal does focus on the opening of 4 new schools: Bowling Road Elementary, Pleasant Plains Elementary, Rex Road Elementary, and Felton Grove High School. Also, the proposal includes base assignment changes, much of which we'll talk about here, calendar application changes, and other recommendations to relieve captain overcrowded schools while filling underutilized schools. Many of these changes will allow students to attend a less crowded school and to have shorter bus routes. The proposal also includes recommendations for stability rules for families impacted by recommendations included in the current proposal. All of the information we will share during this evening's session, along with other tools and resources that may be helpful to you, are found on our district website. The enrollment proposal website that you see at the top of your screen is specifically designed to help you access information about the proposal for the 2025-2026 school year, and it will be updated regularly as new information and resources are available throughout our planning process. The main assignment planning site that you see on the lower half of your screen is for anyone interested in learning about our assignment planning process in general. It's a 6-step process that we follow that's guided by Board Policy 4150, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. But if you have interest in learning more about that process, that website is a wonderful resource. We recognize that some of you may be just now joining us, and we just want to remind everybody that we'll be using the Q&A feature in the Google Meet to capture your questions. So again, if you're using a computer, you want to look for the 3 shapes highlighted here somewhere on your toolbar. If you're using a mobile device, you want to start by looking for these 3 dots and then find the 3 shapes. Ultimately, you're looking for that Q&A icon to let you know you found the Q&A feature. Again, we're going to be making sure that we collect all of your questions anonymously. So as you see that your question has been removed from the Q&A, that lets you know that our moderators have successfully captured your question, and we will make every effort to answer all of your questions later in today's session. In addition, just a friendly reminder that the thought exchange is still open regarding this initial draft, and it'll be open through September 29th. This is the official tool that you can use to post comments or thoughts or see what other people are saying about the plan and rate some of those thoughts and comments. Our board is able to see everything that's posted in here, and when it closes on the 29th, staff will take time to summarize all of the information that's been collected, and a summary will be shared with the board during their October 15th work session. I'll show this screen a couple of times throughout the session, but I won't speak to it in such a great detail. So if you don't have questions just yet, I'll put this up a couple of times to remind you how to post those questions throughout the session today. To ensure you have a better understanding of this year's proposal and how it was developed, we're going to take a few minutes to briefly review our planning process and our public engagement progress to date. So again, briefly, we're going to go through a few of the steps, but if you are keenly interested, please go to our assignment planning website. To start with, there is a policy that our board has adopted and has been using for years that guides the development of our district's enrollment process, or the enrollment planning process. It is Board Policy 4150. This policy directs staff to balance, to the extent reasonable, the goals and factors outlined or identified by 4 main pillars, and those are student achievement, stability, proximity, and operational efficiency. Each of these pillars do have specific definitions within this policy, and so we're going to share a brief video with you to help walk you through those 4 pillars and get a better understanding of how they're described in our policy. It does provide a good foundation for the process that we use in developing all of our draft enrollment plans, and in particular, this year's draft.
Understanding student assignment. It's no secret that our school district is growing, and it's growing fast. That means each year we need to address overcrowded schools and often need to open new schools to keep up with this growth. To state the obvious, we may have to reduce the enrollment at an existing school or fill new schools with students. This is done through the annual student assignment process. To best understand when and where new growth is coming in our district, we conduct an annual enrollment forecast. This forecast helps us look ahead up to 10 years and project enrollment growth throughout the district. This information helps us update our capital improvement plan and to make more informed decisions related to school assignments. Each year, some students are assigned to one of our new schools or reassigned to an existing school. This ensures we have balanced school populations across the district. We know families love their schools and that student assignment decisions can be worrisome. That's why we want to be completely transparent in how we make them. Our school board has established 4 pillars that guide each and every student assignment decision. Here's what they mean and how they work together. Student achievement. We want all of our schools to provide the best academic opportunities for our students. This pillar compels us to think about whether a student assignment plan can help reduce high concentrations of poverty or low-performing students at some of our schools. Stability. Essentially, we try to keep as many children at their current school through the exit grade as possible. When reassignments are necessary, we provide the opportunity for some students to submit a stability transfer request and stay at their current school through the exit grade. Operational efficiency. This pillar is about making sure all of our schools and transportation resources are at their best use. Overcrowded schools are a problem. Classrooms packed with too many students are one thing. But then there are the endless carpool lines, bathroom facilities that can't comfortably accommodate everyone, and having to start lunch when most people are still working on breakfast. On the flip side, having under-enrolled schools is an inefficient use of public resources, particularly when there are crowded schools nearby. Proximity. Okay, this one can be a little tricky. In a perfect world, houses would be built in neat little rows on a predictable timeline and at a slow and steady rate. As it is, we live in an imperfect world where lots and lots of homes pop up in one area, while growth is slight or non-existent in others. For this reason, it is impossible to send every child to their most proximate school unless we want some of our schools bursting at the seams while others are half empty. That said, this pillar states that we will send students to schools within a reasonable distance. Often, the difference between the most proximate school and the next most proximate school is no more than a couple of miles. Please remember that we must consider all 4 of these pillars when making assignment decisions. There is no priority among the 4 that applies in every situation. It's a balancing act that ultimately helps us come up with the best possible plan for everyone. Thank you for working with us to ensure our school system continues to serve all students well. Understanding students.
Video always wants to restart. We hope that video was informative and helped you to better understand how each of the 4 pillars are defined and balanced when we're developing annual enrollment plans. And again, all of this information is available on our website if you did join us partway through that video. At this point, then, I just want to remind you that in addition to that guidance that's provided by the board policy, we also follow a planning cycle that involves 6 main steps. The first step is the presentation of the annual enrollment forecast. This forecast provides both 1- and 10-year projections for enrollment growth in the district. Even though the enrollment forecast does provide a 10-year outlook, it is updated every year or annually to account for any changes in residential development plans, birth rates, economic factors, anything that could have an impact on the forecast. However, simply knowing how many students we're going to have can be very helpful for budget planning and that sort of thing, but knowing where they're going to be distributed throughout the district is extremely helpful when we're developing our annual enrollment plans. So what you see here is a map that depicts the projected growth in student enrollment within Wake County Public Schools over the next 10 years across the district. What you should notice is that the growth is not evenly distributed throughout the district and that some areas of our county are projected to stabilize and have minimal changes in student numbers over the next 10 years. I have and since we're talking mostly about the northern area, I think I've got nope, I don't. Okay, so it'll be mostly this area that we're talking about in today's presentation. You can see there's some growth over here in the southeast Raleigh corner, but there's a lot of stable growth over here in the northern and northwestern portions of our district. The next step in our process is a review of the projected crowding for the next school year. So in addition to providing that 10-year outlook that we just looked at, the annual forecast also provides a 1-year projection. We use that not only to determine funding needs for the coming school year, but we also use it to predict crowding for the next school year. In this case, what you're seeing is a graphic that was shared in March of 2024 and reflects projected crowding for the current 2024-25 school year. And here is a quick look at the projected crowding across all 3 levels, elementary, middle, and high school throughout the district based on that forecast. And again, all of this information is available on our website if you'd like to look at it in greater detail. The third step in our process then is a review of the Capital Improvement Plan, or the CIP, including any adjustments that have been made during the annual review process for the CIP. What you'll see here highlighted in the green circle is the newest school in our district, Woods Creek Elementary, that just opened this past July. The orange schools represent the new schools that are projected to open in 25-26, and so they make up a big part of this year's enrollment plan. And then you can see here that in the next 3 or 4 years, or excuse me, 6 or 7 years, we're going to see some additional schools coming online in other parts of the district. The chart you see here shows the projected opening years for all of the approved new school projects in the 7-year CIP. I'd like for you to note that although major renovations aren't shown on this list, they are taken into consideration when we're developing enrollment plans. I also want to pause and acknowledge that you probably have noticed there's a little asterisk. Let's see if I can get my drawing tool. There's a little asterisk beside each school here, throughout this entire document. And that's to let you know that due to market volatility, scope changes, any types of change in design or construction, it is always possible that our new and major renovation projects could have a schedule change. And so we just adjust to those as they come in. So essentially, we're constantly reviewing and monitoring the progress of all of our construction projects, and we will adjust recommendations for the annual enrollment plan when needed. At this time, as you can see highlighted in the orange box, we are planning to open Bowling Road Elementary, Pleasant Plains Elementary, Rex Road Elementary, and Felton Grove High School in the 2025-26 school year. There are some major renovation projects that recently completed at Baucom Elementary and Fuquay Varina Middle School that we're also taking into consideration with the recommendations for this year's plan, or the plan for 25-26. During today's session, since no new schools are specifically opening in the other portions of the district, we're going to focus on other recommendations that are included in the plan. All right, so once the forecast is complete, the projected crowding has been analyzed and assessed, and the CIP team has given us all of their updates about construction, major renovations, new construction. We're ready to begin the next step in the planning process, and that's preparing the annual enrollment plan. The first step is public engagement early in the process to go out into communities. The last couple of years, we've really tried to adjust that schedule and get that information from families earlier in the process, particularly in the areas where we're opening new schools. For this year's plan, these sessions were held between March and May. For a complete summary of all of the thoughts and ideas captured during that process, we even held 2 general virtual information sessions and opened up some general thought exchanges during this time to engage everyone in the district. Please go to the assignment planning site that you see here on your screen, and you can access all of the summary reports from those sessions. Overall, we did have an increase of about 75% in total participation, largely in part because we added some virtual sessions to increase access to these important discussions. We also saw an uptick in some of the new school area sessions. We asked families during these sessions, both virtually and in person, what the most important things for district leadership to take into consideration and to know and be aware of when opening a new school, as well as managing growth and school crowding in the area. I will not go through each of these individually. As I said, all of this is on our website, so you're welcome to take the time to look at these at your own time. But as you can see, we captured a lot of different information from all of these sessions, and some of these key takeaways are listed here for you. And here are an additional set of about 4 more key takeaways that we were able to sort of summarize from the work of all of that public engagement this past spring. In addition to those sessions, we also wanted to make sure we had asynchronous or on your own time options for people to access and be a part of the discussion. So we did open up some thought exchanges, and some of you may be familiar with this tool. We had we had one general thought exchange that had over 200 participants post over 125 or 130 thoughts. And so that information is also factored into the planning process as we process and review all of the feedback received. And hopefully you'll notice that some of that feedback led to the recommendations you'll see later in today's session. Again, we had a huge increase in participation this year, so we're really excited that our families are starting to understand that there's ways to get involved in these discussions early in the planning process. Here's just a quick brief review of what we got from some of our new school sessions. Again, the full summary is available on our website. Really, what's probably more critical for you as a family or as a parent or a community member is, what do we do with all this information once we get it? We summarize it, we share it, but how does it factor into the planning process? So one way that we will take this information and take sort of next steps is to figure out, is there some topics that came up that really require a little bit deeper exploration, and perhaps a focus group or an AI supported interview process might really help us dig deep into that question. And so this year, one of the key questions that we identified was related to calendar alignment. We invited those who volunteered to participate in our focus groups to participate in AI supported interviews. We were actually able to even expand access to those this year. In previous years, we were limited to 20 to 30 participants. And this year, we were able to invite all 500 people who had volunteered to participate. Those were recently concluded, and we're going to share a summary of those results at a future work session. Another part of how we take this information and use it for the planning process is to really look at our stability rules and figure out how we can take into consideration the concerns that have been expressed by families and community members about providing stability for their families, while also being mindful of our responsibility to be good stewards of the resources in the district. So hopefully, again, you'll see that reflect in the stability rules that we really took to heart a lot of the feedback we received from families, and have expanded and increased access to the stability rules for many families throughout the district. And then one thing that just really has been coming up over the last couple of years in particular, and probably is on top of mind for many families, is really, can we be considering cohort continuity, feeder patterns, going from the same elementary to middle school, or going from the same middle school to high school together as a social group or as a community group or as a neighborhood. And again, we're hopeful that you'll see that we took that to heart with some of the recommendations we'll go over today. So these are just a few examples of how we use that feedback. There's many more, but we just wanted to sort of highlight and answer that question for families. Once we conducted that public engagement, we're also ready to start having a conversation with our board early in the process to say, hey, we've got a new enrollment plan coming. What would you like for us to consider? So in May, we had a clarifying discussion with the board to determine what all should be included in this year's enrollment plan. And what you can see is that what was asked to be included, of course, was information and attendance areas for our 4 new schools. They did ask us to continue looking at capped and overcrowded schools throughout the district and see if we could provide additional relief to those. And then they, of course, asked us to continue looking at school choice options, particularly working to reduce high concentrations of poverty and promoting integration and diversity, while also improving operational efficiency by maximizing the use of our school facilities and also improving transportation efficiency. So once we get through all of that, we're kind of at the point where we are now, where we're ready to provide some initial recommendations to the board. But before we jump into those, I do want you to sort of understand how steps 5 and 6 play into this. So the information on this slide reflects step 5 in the planning process, reviewing and approving CAP schools due to overcrowding concerns. This is work that's completed after the approval of a plan. So we approved a plan for 24-25 in November of last year. And by February of this year, we were able to kind of see, where impacts were able to be successful in reducing crowding and where they weren't, and have conversations with the board about the need to continue caps at several schools. But we also were able to remove caps at 3, which was the first time in a while that we've been able to do that without adding any new ones. You can see here all of the schools throughout the district that are listed as capped. You'll even notice some have an FP beside them. That's these 2 here. That means in addition to having a regular cap, they also have a feeder pattern cap, which means that early on, students could potentially already be put on a wait list even when they're not ready to start school there, so that they have that priority as they age forward. For more information, please visit our website. We have all kinds of information about our CAP schools there. And here you see step 6 in the planning process, which is reviewing options to address other school utilization concerns. In particular, part 3, and some of you may be familiar with this because it did impact the northern and northeastern portion of the county. We were asked to review schools operating on a multi-track year-round calendar that did not have long-term crowding concerns. As a result, the board did approve calendar changes for 2 of our middle schools for the 2025-26 school year. You can see them highlighted here. That's Pine Hollow Middle and Roseville Middle. If you've been impacted by those changes, you should have already been notified by our district as well as your principals. And you'll see some recommendations in this year's plan that are responsive to this calendar change. Again, all of this information is on our website, so I won't talk about these in any greater detail, but if you really want to get into the forecast, the link to the actual entire forecast where you can look at the charts and the tables is there. If you want to look at how we do our capital improvement planning process, there's links to those processes. So if you go to the assignment planning page, the one highlighted here at the bottom, you'll find links to all 6 steps and information about how all of that works as part of our planning process. Quick reminder for those of you that might have just now joined us or you're just now thinking of a question, we're going to be using the Q&A feature here in Google Meet. So you're looking for these types of tools to post a question. Again, we'll make sure that they all stay anonymous. Once you see that your question is removed, that's a thumbs up that our moderators captured it. You do not need to resubmit it. And of course, we would love it if you would continue to participate in our thought exchange, and it will remain open through September 29th. All right, so let's get into it. Here we're going to share with you some recommendations for the greater Raleigh area. We're not going to specifically talk about the new schools, at least not now. If we have time at the end and someone has a question, we certainly can address that. But the focus here will be the recommendations related to school choice options, specifically in the Southeast Raleigh, the Northwest and the Northeastern portions of our county. We want you to recognize that guidance provided by 4150 is, a major factor in the recommendations that you'll see. The input and feedback we received from families and community members throughout our public engagement processes have been taken into consideration. Our need to continue to address capped and overcrowded schools while also being mindful of future school openings. We won't talk about that as much in this session, but you'll see that in the other recommendations included in the plan. The need to continue to reduce our high concentrations of poverty throughout the district, promote integration and diversity are certainly top of mind. And of course, the need to support improvements in both operational and transportation efficiency. And I think those you'll definitely see some connections. So in summary, we've completed steps 1 through 3 for this year's enrollment plan. We're right in the middle of step 4. And then after the board makes a final decision late in November on the 25-26 enrollment plan, we'll start initiating steps 5 and 6 so that we can be prepared for the start of school in 25-26. Quick overview is for the base assignment changes. You'll notice that the large majority of base assignment changes are happening over here in the southern and western edges of our county because that's where those 3 new elementary schools are opening. But you'll see some small changes over here, and those are the ones we'll talk about today. The other thing we'd like to draw your attention to is how much of the district is not impacted by reassignment. So the goal this year was to really focus on the impacts related to the opening of new schools and where possible to perhaps give students some shorter bus routes in other parts of the county while dealing with different utilization concerns. At the middle school level, again, some small changes. We'll talk about this area and these 2 areas a little bit later in our presentation today, but most of what you're seeing on this side of the map is related to sort of a cascade effect with the opening of those elementary schools or the high school that's going to be in that portion of the county as well. And again, just a quick overview of base assignment changes. We'll talk about the ones up here, but this is all largely related to the opening of Felton Grove High School, which will be in the sort of Apex, Cary, Holly Springs area. So today we're going to talk about the choices or the assignment recommendations that are related to those school choice options. As Eric mentioned as he began our session, we're really going to focus on those versus the new schools today. And before we jump into the recommendations, we realize that most of you probably have questions about how the stability rules work. You probably understand because you've used the address lookup tool that perhaps your address is in the plan with a recommended assignment change, but you're thinking, well, what does this mean for me and my family? So we thought we would start with the stability rules first and then talk through the recommendations. So because the recommendations that we're talking about in today's session All involve assigning students from a school that's already open and operating to another school that's already open and operating. And in response to that feedback from community members, we've recommended very generous stability rules for this year's plan. So if your students are impacted by an elementary school assignment change from one elementary school that's already open and working today to another elementary school that's already open and working today, you would have the ability to put in a stability request if your student's rising into any grade 1 through 5. So if they're an existing kindergarten through 4th grade student that wants to stay at that current elementary school and you can provide transportation or work with the neighbors to, develop a carpool plan, we're happy to approve all of those transfers. You'll see the note at the bottom that says they do need to be submitted during a particular window. That'll be later in December. We'll have more firm dates for everybody once we get to October and we do the presentation, because the board did change some dates on us. And so we're responding to that to figure out what the specific window time will be. But if your student is impacted by an elementary school change and you're eligible for a stability transfer, you'll receive communication from our office or the central district. You'll also receive some communication from your principal, because we're going to do a two-pronged approach to make sure you really get all that information. But again, if your child's at an elementary school being proposed to be assigned to a different elementary school and they're currently in kindergarten through 4th grade, all of them would be eligible to stay at their current school if you can figure out transportation. In addition, if you've got a young one at home that's rising into kindergarten for 25, 26, they would be eligible as well for that stability transfer, and they can stay through the 5th grade. All of them can. So do really think about that. We'll probably get a question about it later. I know, Eric, the last time that we had a session, several came up. Your kindergarten students can be pre-registered as early as mid-October. We will open our pre-registration process right now. It's scheduled for October 14th. So barring any technical issues, effective October 14th, you can go to your base school, take some information for your rising kindergarten student, and go ahead and get them pre-registered or pre-enrolled so that you can get that ID number, and then they'll be eligible for the stability transfer by the time the window opens in December. Same would be true for a 6th grader or a 9th grader that maybe is going to a different school and isn't in the district. You can do the same thing. You can get them pre-registered. Our middle schools, again, very generous stability rules, same thing. So all the recommendations we're going to talk about for the sort of Raleigh area, all are from an existing middle school to an existing middle school. We're not opening any new middle schools this year. So any student who's a current 6th or 7th grader that would like to stay at their current school would be eligible to do so as a rising 7th or 8th grader, and that rising 6th grade sibling could join. So if you've got students that are close enough together where they'll be in middle school at the same time, we can approve all of your family to stay together. Again, there's no district transportation provided because the neighborhood will now have transportation going to whatever the newly assigned school is. So, do be mindful of that. We can't promise that there'll be transportation from your area to your existing school, as those routes will now be redirected to the new base school for the area. But if you are not sure whether or not you can make that transportation work, it's probably best to go ahead and put in the stability transfer this December. And then if by the time we get to March, you're like, oh, we just can't make the transportation work, or, oh, we found out your best friend's actually going to go to the new school. This is great. Then you can put in what we call a back to base transfer. We'll automatically approve those if you put them in that official window. And I'm sure we'll have questions about it, so I'll just keep moving on and we can deal with that during the questions portion of tonight's session. And then last but not least, same kind of thing at the high school level. If your student is projected to go from one high school to another high school based on the assignment changes being recommended, every grade level would be eligible for a stability transfer as long as they've already attended the school, right? So that current 9th, 10th, or 11th grader, they would have the ability to put that in. And of course, that incoming sibling, if you've got one, would be eligible as well. We do have lots of frequently asked questions already on some of these posted to our website, so you're certainly welcome to go there, but you can also hang tight because we're going to answer questions live today. But just as a reminder, all of our resources are posted here. And after tonight's session, we're going to summarize all the different virtual information sessions we've had, and we're going to start upgrading and updating that frequently asked questions portion of our website. So continue to visit the enrollment proposal site somewhat regularly over the next couple weeks so you can look for those answers if we get to a question that we couldn't answer today. All right. So again, how do you post questions today? Use this Q&A feature here in the Google Meet. And how do you participate in the conversation? Just keep joining in on that thought exchange. And I do see some questions coming in, so it looks like most of you figured out how to use that tool. But if not, just keep looking there. All right, so let's dive into the recommendations that are not related to the opening of new schools. So one of the first recommendations that we have is to allow students to go closer to home, go to school closer to home. To orient you, this yellow line represents a portion of the Beltline or 440. This yellow line represents 87, 64, the highway that comes out and goes towards Knightdale, Wendell, and Zebulon. Wake Med Hospital is roughly kind of in this area. So what we're looking at is taking the area highlighted by this circle that currently is assigned to a school that's pretty far away, Oak Grove Elementary. It's in the sort of Apex Cary area. And instead of having them assigned to that school, bring them to a school significantly closer to home and be assigned to Powell Elementary. So the map that you see on the left represents the current assignment areas for schools that are being impacted. The map on the right is what the projected future base attendance areas would look like for these schools. So you'll notice there is a portion of the neighborhood that would still go to Oak Grove. It's a significant number of students. It's a few too many to bring all back in one group. I will say that most of this area is undeveloped and is currently under development. So at this point, I don't even think there are actual students residing here. So we are sort of moving an attendance area before the students move in. So that's one of the things we hear from family members and community members a lot is, hey, can you move the new assignment areas instead of the, neighborhoods that are already existing? And so this sort of factors in both of those. Let's get students closer to home, let's get a shorter bus ride, and let's try to impact families that have yet to move into an area. So again, this would move students from Oak Grove Elementary to Powell Elementary, mostly for proximity, transportation efficiency, and also, looking at moving a new development. What you'll see here then, we'll see some charts like this throughout our presentation. The ones that have the blue label are the ones that are showing you if we made no assignment changes in this area, what would the projected crowding of the schools be? So you can see that Oak Grove is a multi-track year-round schools, not quite full. It does have some trailers on the campus, right? But it's not quite full. And that Powell's pretty full, but keep in mind that Powell is one of our magnet schools and takes in application students through the magnet lottery. So we do have some ability to control how full the school gets by determining how many seats can be filled. You can see that this has a nominal impact on both schools. And so we'll just continue to monitor Powell over time to make sure that it doesn't become too overcrowded. Sorry, I didn't tell you what the orange is. So the orange then is if we were to approve the assignment change, as you saw on that second map, this would be the projected crowding for the schools over time. So again, it's not a significant number of students being moved, but it does allow those families to go to school significantly closer to home. This then is that exact same area at the middle school level. So this particular attendance area is already assigned to Enloe High School, but it's continues to be assigned to Oak Grove Elementary and Dillard Drive Middle. So the idea would be for cohort continuity, feeder pattern to allow these families to have a solid sort of feeder pattern going through school. So if they're going to go to Powell Elementary, let's have them go to Ligon Middle. And so that's what you're seeing with this recommendation here is to take this area from Dillard Middle and assign it to Ligon Middle. And you can see with the green patterns here and here that there's quite a few students in this general area that go to Ligon Middle. So that would give them that cohort continuity or that feeder pattern stability. Again, if we were to make no changes, the crowding at the schools would look something like this, the 91 or 95% crowding. By making the recommendation, it does relieve Dillard a little bit, but not significantly. And obviously it's got some growth in its space, so it's going to be okay over time. With both of these schools, they're both currently magnet schools, so we can also make sure that we're keeping an eye on them using our magnet application process to balance these schools. The next set of recommendations goes into the sort of northwestern part of our county. So to align you, this yellow line is actually 540. So 440 is off screen down here. This is Glenwood. I think that's right. The going out towards the airport. And then this is that major road. Oh, I'm losing all my roads. It's that major north-south road that goes toward like Granville County. So what this is the pink represents an existing portion of the Carroll Middle School base. The yellow represents the existing Leesville Middle base, Leesville Road Middle. I know this looks really weird right here. That's Hilburn. So Hilburn has that K-8 program, and so that's why it's got a real small base right in the middle of the Leesville base. So what the recommendation here is to take some portions of the Carroll base that are going to Barton Pond Elementary. So if you may recall, in this region several years ago, we opened up a new elementary school, Barton Pond Elementary. And when that happened, a couple of different elementary schools, pieces were taken up to build the base attendance area for Barton Pond. And at this time, the students at Barton Pond, once they finish 5th grade, can go to a number of different middle schools, because at the time we didn't realign any of the middle school base attendance areas to create that sort of natural feeder pattern. And so what this does is continues the work that follows on after opening a new elementary school. And the recommendation is to take this area from Carroll Middle and add it to Leesville Road Middle, so that those Barton Pond students would have a more logical feeder into Leesville Road Middle. One neighborhood in here that we heard a lot from was Evans Mill. And so that's part of this region. And that was specifically in response to feedback we received from community members over the last couple of years during public engagement. So this recommendation is responsive to public feedback. It's also being made to allow for a little bit closer to home, right? So the transportation efficiency, as you can see, Leesville Road Middle's right here. So it's a little bit closer to their actual home area, and to create that cohort or feeder pattern alignment. As you can see, these two schools have sufficient capacity to handle this type of transfer. Carroll is a magnet school, so we can always add more priority applicants to the school over time as the students move. And so this shows you the projected crowding at both schools after the move. So it's not a significant number of students, but it does at least allow them to have a more natural feeder pattern, as well as go to a school a little bit closer to home. Another set of recommendations that we have that are unrelated to the opening of a new school, that are sort of in the Raleigh area, is related to a feeder pattern misalignment. So the area that you see highlighted here in pink, so let me orient you. This is the Beltline. This is 540. And this is that Capitol Boulevard right before the one in Lewisburg kind of split. So this region right here that's highlighted in the circle currently is assigned to Brassfield Elementary School. And then its next two assignments are Centennial Middle and Southeast Raleigh High School. The portion that you see here in blue that's remaining represents a significant portion of the Brentwood Elementary base attendance area. And many years ago, the idea was that that magnet program that's at Brentwood really feeds nicely into the magnet programs at Centennial and Southeast. So let's allow the base students to follow that wonderful magnet curriculum and follow that pathway without having to put in magnet applications. And then the magnet students obviously would put in their magnet applications. Well, this portion doesn't go to Brentwood. It goes to Brassfield. So this is to clean up that feeder pattern to allow for some cohort continuity. The majority of students at Brassfield Elementary go to either Wakefield Middle or West Millbrook Middle. So the recommendation here is to align it with the West Millbrook piece, so that they can go to a school closer to home, also be able to have that cohort continuity with neighbors in their community. And so that's why this recommendation is being made. So again, thinking about that public feedback we talked about earlier, this is responsive to that cohort or feeder pattern continuity, as well as transportation efficiency. As you can see, this would be the projected crowding at both schools, so there's sufficient space for students to move around. West Millbrook has moved into its newly renovated facility with expanded capacity. Yes, it's taking on magnet students, but it also has room for some additional base. So this is sort of a win-win for that new campus. And then any seats that are made available at Centennial Middle are obviously available for priority magnet applications. So this does open up some more seats at the school for those magnet students. This exact same area as I mentioned, is currently assigned to Southeast Raleigh High School. And so the recommendation would be for a common feeder pattern of Brassfield to West Millbrook and then on to Millbrook. And so the idea here would be that the recommendation is to take that same area and assign it to Millbrook High School for that feeder pattern alignment, for that cohort continuity, and obviously to reduce the transportation route for those students. Similarly, both of the schools have sufficient capacity to monitor this. I know that this looks a little high, but if you'll notice, Millbrook is in an area that's aging out a little bit, so it can afford a few extra students as it's continuing to develop and build and strengthen its magnet program. And of course, at Southeast Raleigh High School, any seats that become available are certainly open for additional magnet students. And they also have a very high growth area assigned to their base that's going to start taking off in the next 2 or 3 years. You don't quite see it here for 26, 27, but that space is going to be needed for those students coming out of the Old Town subdivision, if those of you that are familiar with that area. And so that's it for the base assignment changes that are not related to the opening of new schools. So hopefully that clarified those. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the impacts to your family because you've used our address lookup tool. But I just like to make sure you have context as to why the recommendations are being made and kind of where they came from. Here, these are largely not going to impact you on these first few slides because we're opening so many elementary schools. The base assignment changes that are happening are making it to where they're no longer going to need their current calendar application. So by way of example, students that are at Buckhorn Creek Elementary, which operates on a traditional calendar today, have access to a couple of choices for multi-track year-round with transportation. But right now, that area is being recommended to go to a new school that'll operate on a multi-track year-round calendar. Therefore, they won't need a multi-track year-round calendar option because they'll have it in their base. So most of the changes that you'll see to the calendar applications in this year's plan, particularly at the elementary level, are related to the opening of those new schools and just kind of resetting it. As I told the board during our work session, I wish these could just be technical corrections that staff took care of on their behalf. However, because it's part of what is considered an assignment option, it does require board approval. So it was slide 61 and 62. You'll see here, the one that impacts this area is that assignment area that we're talking about that's over there off of like Carl Sandburg and Sunnybrook. It's kind of that general area. They're currently assigned to Oak Grove, which is multi-track. They currently have a traditional calendar option of Penny Road. The recommendation is for them to go to Powell Elementary, which is a traditional calendar school. So there won't be a need for a traditional calendar option anymore. And so that's why this change is in the recommendations. Additional elementary schools that don't impact this area, but same types of things. Here, these really do impact you. So there's a couple of things at play in the northern and the sort of northeastern portion of the county. Not only do we have a handful of assignment recommendation changes like Carroll to Leesville, or Centennial to West Millbrook, or Dillard to Ligon, we also have the nuance that Pine Hollow will no longer operate on a multi-track year-round calendar starting in the 25-26 school year. So it can't serve as a multi-track year-round calendar option for families because it won't offer that calendar. So what you're seeing here is a combination of, in the case of Centennial, we're taking you from Centennial, which operates on a modified calendar, used to have a traditional calendar option of Dillard, being proposed to go to West Millbrook, which operates on a traditional calendar. Therefore, you don't need a traditional calendar option anymore because your base school offers that calendar. In the case of Carroll, because that one area is being recommended to go from Carroll to Leesville, they both operate on the traditional calendar. However, Pine Hollow won't operate on a multi-track year-round calendar anymore, so it can't serve as a multi-track year-round calendar option. And so that's why those recommendations are here. And then these are a little bit more intense, same basic premise as that Carroll example, but since Pine Hollow will no longer serve as a multi-track year-round school and Roseville Middle will no longer operate on a multi-track year-round calendar, they can't serve as multi-track year-round calendar options for attendance areas anymore. And so that's what you're seeing here. The other piece is that since they'll no longer be operating on the multi-track year-round calendar, they don't need a traditional calendar application option. You'll notice that it says NA, and what we mean by that is that there's no longer going to be district transportation provided to these options. It does not mean that you can't continue to ask for them. It does not mean that you can't ask for a different option. I know in your region, Durant Road Middle, I think Heritage Middle also operate on multi-track year-round. Neuse River operates on the modified calendar. So there are options in your area to get that calendar alignment if you'd like it. We just can't promise district transportation because I haven't mentioned it yet today, but with the bus driver shortage nationally as well as locally, our district just cannot continue to offer all that transportation for different options. We're really focusing on that base transportation, getting that better, improving that wherever we can, and the magnet transportation. All right, I think we've got a lot of questions I saw a lot getting popped in there. So let's go ahead and quickly go over our timeline and then we'll get to the questions. So here's where we are. We're doing all of our virtual public engagement. We're also have an in-person session, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. October 15th is when we're going to come back to the board. On October 15th, we're going to share a summary of all the feedback we've received from sessions like this one, as well as the thought exchange. In addition, if for some reason there are adjustments that need to be recommended based on the feedback that we're receiving from families, we will make those recommendations at that time. You'll get a notification from the district once the October 15th session has started, so you can look at the materials and see if there have been any changes in your area. And then we're sort of handing it over to the board at that point. And so we will help them. We'll host any information sessions that are needed, but then the board will host their official public hearing on November 12th. That'll be part of a regularly scheduled board meeting, and that's an opportunity to come before the board, explain yourself to the board, give them the reasons why you have concerns or support for the recommendations. And then they'll make any final recommendations to staff so that they can take up for review the final draft on November 26th. The goal is to have an approved plan at the end of that meeting so that we can then start communicating with families and you can start making plans. This is our last virtual information session that we've got scheduled for this portion of the planning process. The next event that we have is next week on Tuesday. It'll be an in-person open house. It is going to be at Herbert Akins Road Middle School, which is in the Fuquay Arena area, which for some of you may be a bit of a distance, but it is where the majority of those new schools were opening. We were trying to find a location that was somewhat between the two, but you are absolutely more than welcome to join us there. We're going to have staff from our academics and athletics, special education services, transportation, before and after school care. So if you want to talk face to face with one of those staff members about the support you might need as you transition to your new school, you're absolutely more than welcome to come. We'll have area superintendents and principals there to answer your school-based questions or your site-based questions. But again, that session will be on Tuesday of next week at Herbert Akins Road Middle. More information's on our website. You can find all the information and address, all that kind of stuff on this site and the important dates to know. All right, Eric, I'm going to take a sip of water while you let me know where we are with the questions. And if anybody has any new or questions that you haven't had a chance to post yet, if you'll take the opportunity to use our Q&A feature, and then we're going to get to some live questions.
Sounds good. Thank you, Susan. I know, folks, we've reviewed a lot of information, and we would like to address as many of your questions as possible. Please make sure you take a few minutes and post any questions or comments using the Q&A feature. As you are posting questions, we will review those that have already been submitted during the session, and we'll start with those. So let's take a look and see what people are asking about. And starting with stability. My children don't fit the current proposed stability rules based on grade level. We would like to stay and would provide transportation. Is that possible?
So I'm assuming this means that the children are not quite yet at school age, because every recommendation we reviewed today, every student who's currently attending a school would be eligible to remain at their current school as long as you could provide transportation. The only students who would not be eligible are students who have not yet attended the school and don't have an older sibling there. So if that's the example, so whoever posted that, if you're still here, if you could give us a clarifying question, that would be really great. So the only ones that I think would fit into this category is, let's say I'm in the group that's supposed to go from Southeast Raleigh High School to Millbrook High School, and I am currently in the 7th grade. I haven't yet started at Southeast Raleigh High School, and I don't have an older sibling. You are correct. You wouldn't be eligible because the stability rules are specific to the year the plan is approved and implemented. There's only one round of transfers for that. It's during the December window, so you do have to already be an existing student at the school to be eligible for that. So if you were asking for that seat in a later year, luckily, Southeast is a magnet school, so you could always use the magnet application period to ask for a school like that one, or Millbrook or Centennial. Several of the schools we're talking about here are magnet schools that you're being assigned away from, so you could certainly try to use the magnet application process to get a seat. And then, of course, if you have a specific hardship concern, you could use our general transfer process or our official transfer process. Generally, the first 2 weeks of March. So again, if this is for a future year, you just want to keep checking the website. Now I'm going to answer it a different way, Eric, just to take some license. If this is a family who actually is impacted by the opening of one of our new schools, is just joining us today because you didn't have an opportunity to come to one of the earlier sessions, and your students don't meet the age criteria for those, because there are some very specific recommendations for new schools, then your best bet, if you really feel like you've got a specific hardship reason for needing that transfer, would be to use the general transfer process to ask for that seat. I'm going to be very honest with you, because it's a reassignment and your student's not eligible under the stability rules. For the most part, our staff or administration would have to deny those requests or not approve those requests, because it would go against board policy to approve them. But you would be eligible to appeal that to the board. And if you have very specific, unique circumstances that demonstrate a hardship per policy, the board could consider approving it. But I don't want to oversell it and make you feel like you're going to get it guaranteed. So I hope that hits both sides of the potential for that question.
We will find out if a clarifying question comes in. I have a kindergartner who is subject to a base school change and another student who won't go to school for 2 years. Can that student also be considered for stability transfer if my current student takes that option?
It's yes, but the technical answer is no. So what it is the stability rules, as I mentioned with the last question, are specific to the year the plan is approved. Once we get into the next year, a future year, our regular transfer policies are in place. And our regular transfer policy says that however the older student got there, if you want to get a kindergartner to join their older sibling at the same campus, we can approve those. So the short answer is yes. It's just the technical answer is it wouldn't be considered a stability transfer at that point. It would just be a regular transfer. And you would ask for it in March or whenever we set that window in the spring.
I know this was an early question posted in stability, probably before stability rules were reviewed,
Okay.
but just for review, for a student who is currently a K or second grade student and being changed to a newly constructed school, are they able to stay at their current school if transportation is being provided?
Unfortunately, no. Right now, with the current stability rules, you've got to be a rising fourth or fifth grade student. And the only way a younger student would be able to have access to the stability rules is if they had that older fourth or fifth grade sibling. The challenge we have is that when we open new schools, we need to make sure we have a sufficient number of students to offer all the wonderful academic programming that's going to be needed for the students at the school. In addition, I would like to clarify, I don't know that it came up in my presentation, what we're offering now already is an expansion beyond what the board historically has done. Historically, when we open new schools, I'll be honest, and do just school to school reassignments, the policy is very clear that the only guarantee, as particularly at the elementary level, is a rising fifth grade student. Middle school, it's 8, the high school, it's 12. Beyond that, the board did not guarantee in their policy anything more generous than that. So because we've been listening to feedback of parents, we've done what we could to offer slightly more generous rules. So you're seeing that fourth and fifth grade student instead of just fifth grade. In addition, the generosity that's been able to be built in is that those younger students, historically, if they came with their older sibling, they could only stay for that 1 year. So in the elementary example, the rising fifth grade student got their stability transfer. The younger second grade student got the stability transfer. At the end of the year, when the fifth grader moved on to middle school, that now third grader would have to go to the new elementary school. So those stability transfers were only valid as long as that older student was there. That's something we've improved over the last couple of years, is that once you get that transfer, it's good through fifth grade. So there are changes. I do feel bad that our kindergarten through second grade families can't take advantage of that generosity, but there already is additional generosity built into the rules beyond what historically has been available to families.
We want to keep our middle school students at their current school and not move to the newly assigned middle school. Are we able to submit a request for a bus?
Oh, for a bus. The short answer is yes, you can always submit what is considered an ineligible bus rider request. The challenge will be just whether or not there are any routes continuing in or near your area that would allow your student to be eligible to ride the bus. So I want to be real careful to say we cannot guarantee that any student that's on a stability transfer would have access to a bus. But yes, you could still put in that request. Oh goodness, I'm sorry, my computer's trying to restart. Okay. You could, I stopped it. You could put in that request. It's usually the first couple of weeks of school. There's a form that pops up on the transportation portion of our website where you can put in a request for ineligible transportation and see if there's a route. So yes, you can always ask for it. I just want to be really cautious. I cannot guarantee that it would be available or that it could be approved.
There are several questions that have asked why the stability rules are different for some schools versus others. Can you address that?
Sure. A little bit of what I said in the last question. When we're talking about existing schools, what we've been trying to do is be responsive to feedback from families that, hey, can you give us as much stability as possible? So when it's going from a school that's already in operation to a school that's already in operation, we felt that the schools could handle a lag in the official adjustment of enrollment, meaning the sending school could stay a little bit crowded for a little bit longer. The receiving school could gradually take on those new students and hire the teachers necessary to support them. And that would also allow families that opportunity to stay at their current school. The challenge when we're opening a new school is that there's nobody there. There's not a single student on campus. There's not a single teacher hired. So the only way for us to get that school to a point where it can offer high quality academic programming, make sure you have all of your specials, arts, media, PE, I'm missing something, music, make sure you have all of those offerings, make sure that you have fully staffed, classrooms for your K through fifth grade classrooms, make sure you have the appropriate number of positions to support your AIG students, your special education students, get your counselor, your assistant principal. All of those staff members are contingent on the total enrollment of the school. And so if we use really generous stability rules when we open a new school, that new school is going to be really restricted in its ability to truly offer the appropriate academic programming for students. In addition, it's good to go ahead and get those cohorts over and get started so that those students that are part of that first class at that new school, they get a lot, they get a lot of say in some things. They get to be a part of being a leader on their campus. They get to be a part of developing the culture for their school. And so it's mostly that ability to make sure we have high quality academic programming and can fully staff the school. But there's also some advantages to going ahead and getting the school started with a good number of students so that it can have a good, strong community going forward.
I have a rising sixth grader who currently goes to Holly Ridge Elementary and is now districted to Herbert Akins Middle. Is there a case we can argue stability to keep our oldest in Holly Ridge Middle?
It's using language differently. I have to say, technically, you couldn't use stability as the transfer because the stability transfer is a very specific kind of transfer. It's a transfer that's offered by the board when they approve a plan to allow families some time to adjust to a change in assignment for their address. It's a one-shot deal. We offer them in December, we close it up, and we move on. Could you use the language of stability of calendar and trying to make sure your student continues on the traditional calendar and you're asking for a traditional calendar middle school during our regular transfer period, or really even during the magnet application period? You may not be aware, but the vast majority of our magnet schools all operate on a traditional calendar. So you've got a couple of options there. So I would highly encourage you to think about your magnet options because that application period will open up first. And if any of those are amenable to your family and would serve your needs and also give you access to that high quality programming, you can put in that type of an application. Or when we open up the official transfer window in March, you could certainly put in a request for a traditional calendar middle school that would work for your family. You'd have to check your address lookup to see if transportation was available or not, or if you'd need to provide transportation. But yes, you could put in a transfer at that time and you could talk about wanting that stability of calendar for your student. And that certainly is something that staff can consider as long as space is available. And candidly, in that very specific example, Herbert Akins Road Middle's kind of crowded. So if we could find a traditional option that would help your family, that might serve the needs of both the district and your family.
Our next topic is calendar changes.
Okay.
For those with forced calendar changes, why are there no options for some to apply to a school with the same calendar?
Yeah. It's a distinction between option with transportation. So we've not taken away any options for families to participate in the magnet application period, similar to what I said in the last question, or to participate in the request for transfer period and ask for a school that meets the needs of your family. We've just really had to back away as a district from continuing to guarantee transportation to those options. You know, when we had 2 and 3 buses coming into a neighborhood to take kids to 2 and 3 different schools at the same grade level, and it wasn't supporting the magnet program, it's part of why in the bus driver shortage, we were seeing those long bus routes and having to rotate bus drivers to routes that were uncovered. So, as a district, we just don't feel comfortable continuing to add to that transportation burden for the district because we really want to make sure we're improving reliability for the routes that we are maintaining. So, it's less about not having an option, it's more about not having an option that comes with transportation. So the district is still committed to offering all of the different choice options, and based on space availability and all those sorts of things, we certainly evaluate each one of those requests. You're still muted, Eric.
You're right. The That was it for calendar changes, but now
Okay.
moving to community engagement sessions.
Okay.
Um, Ultimately, I think the question is which engagement sessions were focused for Ashley Downs and Pearson Farms?
Okay, so that's not one of the Raleigh area ones. That's a different
Right,
area that was discussed in a
right.
different session. There was a session held at Scotts Ridge Elementary this past spring. There was also a session held at I think we held them both at Scotts Ridge for the Pleasant Plains opening. And during both of those sessions, we had a very broad invitation list, and we invited a lot of families from that entire region to come have conversations with us about growth and crowding in the region. So both of the sessions that were hosted at Scotts Ridge Elementary, both this spring 2024 and the spring of 2023, were focused on the crowding concerns there. And we particularly spent a lot of time this past spring talking about the impact of the new capacity at Bauckham and how that might help provide some relief in the region. In fact, we even added like the whole White Oak area to expand the session. So that those neighborhoods were invited to those 2 sessions over the last couple of public engagement series.
When reaching out to the impacted neighborhoods, are you reaching out only to the people with children currently in the school, or does the scope include the entire community?
It's, it's a tough question to answer because as a district, I only know the students that are ours. I don't know students that don't go to our district. I don't have access to their emails, let's say, or that sort of thing. So we do start our focus with our existing students so that we can make sure that the families that are attending Wake County schools are being able to participate in it. But we also post things on our website. We post things in our community message. So if anybody has signed up for our community messages, they would be getting these same invitations and the same information. The sessions that we hold in the spring are held at elementary schools and middle schools, so there are space limitations. So we do have to be cautious with how broad and wide we, send those invitations. But we are very broad and wide with our invitations related to things like thought exchange or anything that's asynchronous that doesn't require seats. So yes, it's sort of a both and. But I will be candid as a district. If you've not signed up for our community message or you're not checking our website, we don't really have a way to share information with you because we don't have your contact information.
There is a person here who has heard something related to potential changes of Parkside Middle School transitioning to a high school. Does that sound like a thing?
I think what they may be referring to is I'm going to close your eyes so you don't get dizzy while I scroll. um, in the last couple of months, the board had some very serious conversations about some site restrictions at what was to be the original site for Morrisville High School. Let me get where am I at? There we go. This is the one I'm looking for. So on this map, you'll notice that Morrisville High School is here now. So what has happened was originally Morrisville High School was supposed to be on this site, a little bit closer to the airport. During the design phase and some initial stages of assessment, the facilities design and construction team recognized that in order to move forward with having Morrisville at the site I'm circling right now, that the school would be really restricted in its size, on the order of maybe 1,200 high school students or less, when most of our high schools are 16 to 2,200. So the board did have some conversations through the facilities committee and their board work sessions, and even in a board meeting live about the potential for making an adjustment. So they have officially voted to sort of shift the focus. So the Parkside Middle campus that was already under construction, they paused it. They're doing some redesign and they're going to restructure it. So instead of serving as a middle school, it will serve as Morrisville High School. It'll be able to be larger. It'll be able to actually be constructed sooner. So there's a benefit there. So the site that was previously identified as the Parkside Middle School location, real close to Parkside Elementary, will now be Morrisville High School. The site that we acquired that was originally supposed to be the Morrisville High School site is now going to switch direction and become Parkside Middle. So what that means is, in terms of construction delivery, is that Morrisville High School right now, this is still projections. It could always change. I mean, this was just a recent change. But right now they're targeting an opening year of 27, 28 for Morrisville High School, which is earlier than the original proposal. And at the moment, they're proposing an opening for the Parkside Middle Campus in 28, 29. Again, these could all adjust as the process continues forward. But either way, the high school will open prior to the middle school. They're both going to open. They're both going to serve the region. But it now is going to change our approach to enrollment planning for the middle schools in that area. So you'll hear more about that this spring as we think about advancing some other types of adjustments to relieve schools like Mills Park while we wait for Parkside Middle to be open. But yes, the board did recently approve that. I cannot tell you what day it was, but I know most of it was routed through the facilities committee and also some discussions at work session in the board meeting. So if you are interested in knowing more about that, you can check the board's website and look for their meeting materials to get all the details on that. And I think there was even an information session held late August out at Alston Ridge Middle to help families understand this as well. Dr. Taylor was there with the team to talk about it.
Can you speak to the decision to make Bowling Road Elementary and Fuquay-Varina Middle different calendars when they're next to each other?
Sure. It's a capacity issue. So since we're asking about Bowling Road, I'll pop that slide up. So I said in open session when we shared the recommendations with the board, we get that this is different from anything the board has done in the past or the district has done. For those of you on the call that are unfamiliar with the region, Bowling Road and Fuquay-Varina Middle are both located in the Fuquay area. Bowling Road is located in this sort of southern edge of the county. They're sharing a campus per se with Fuquay-Varina Middle that just had a new construction done and has moved into their site. And so they're essentially sharing the same campus. And so the recommendation for Bowling Road is that it open as multi-track year round because of the existing crowding and the growth in the region. Fuquay is one of our higher growth regions in the county right now. And so recognizing where Bowling Road is physically located in the county, the fact that, go back to the map, Hilltop Needmore is the last school that's an elementary school that's going to open in this region for the foreseeable future. There are no more elementary schools coming to this region. So as a district, we were hesitant to not take advantage of the additional capacity that comes with a multi-track year-round calendar. The capacity reduction is on the order of 200 plus students if we were to open it as traditional. And with the current recommendations that we have for Bowling Road Elementary, you can see that in its very first year, it'll already be close to 70%. We know with the stability rules, it might not open quite that full in year one, but ultimately it's in a continued growth pattern where it will continue to grow. It's one of our highest growth areas in the district. And as a district, we were just really hesitant to open a traditional school and then potentially be faced with having to cap it in a year or two. We've done that in other areas of the district. It's very destabilizing for families, or to come back in a couple of years and talk about changing it from traditional to multi-track to deal with the growth that's showed up. So that's why staff was making the recommendation, is just to be a good steward of taxpayer resources and try to get the biggest school we possibly could. We do recognize that there's a calendar mismatch. However, with Fuquay-Varina Middle students going on to high school, it's a shift. Instead of a K-8 calendar alignment, it's a 6-12 calendar alignment. And some families have indicated that they'd prefer that. So it's kind of striking that balance between extra capacity in the region, but that we don't need at the middle school level. Like converting Fuquay to year-round would not be needed because there's sufficient middle school capacity in the region.
How can
But we
families
get it.
communicate?
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. How can families communicate their concerns with these changes other than the public sessions? Who can
The
they
thought
talk to in a smaller setting?
We hear it loud and clear. We get it. We understand it. It is not falling on deaf ears. The thought exchange, honestly, is the best place to put it, because that means every single board member can see it. If you have a small conversation, you're talking to one or two people, and it loses its power, I'll be honest. But if you can put your thoughts, and I've already seen them in the thought exchange, I've noticed that most of the comments about Bowling World are concerns about operating on a multi-track year-round calendar. We will absolutely share that information with the board, and they're receiving it as well. These sessions are the best way to get that information put forward. And then the board's going to have to deliberate and decide, what's the best next step. We're continuing to look at the impacts of opening on traditional. It's not great. I'll be honest, we've done a lot of assessments. If we were to open on traditional calendar, it would be full very quickly, and we'd be looking at an early cap. And that's something the district is really trying to work away from. But that's not to say that it can't happen. So it has been heard, it is being assessed, it is being evaluated. I would say just stay tuned to October 15th work session to hear the board's conversation about it. But we're hearing it. You don't need to continue. You could certainly continue to add it to the thought exchange, but it is heard, it is captured, it is being assessed, it's being evaluated.
Are there expected middle school reassignments to Southwest Wake County within the next 3 to 5 years?
Yes. High growth area. I will say we've talked about this, particularly a session that we held on Monday. There are some elementary assignments that are going from a multi-track to a traditional, or a traditional to multi-track, and we did not make an adjustment at the middle school level. That was intentional because we knew we were waiting to get that information on Parkside. I'll be honest, that information we got about the switch for Parkside to Morrisville was so late in the process, we could not pivot and respond and come up with some recommendations to support, like the crowding at Mills Park, or what's going on at Davis or Salem. Holly Grove needs some more students. There's a lot of work that needs to be done there. So I would say, yes, stay tuned in the spring for some open dialogue and some open conversations about what we need to be doing in that western and southwestern part of the district to get some calendar alignment, get some capacity alignment. We've got some capped middle schools in this region, and then we have some schools that aren't full. We have some that are multi-track, some that are traditional. We have a lot of options. So the short answer is yes, there will most likely be recommendations at the middle school level in the 26-27 plan, and those conversations we're going to be having in greater detail this coming spring. So stay tuned to check the website, look for opportunities to plug in. And open the emails when we send them to you with invitations.
Are school board members who live in the impacted assignment areas and are themselves impacted by the changes recused from decision due to conflict of interest?
Don't know. That's a good question. I would say as board members, they're representing their district. They don't recuse themselves from regular decisions because they're about their area, but I can certainly float that up, and that is not a question for me, but I will share it. And if we can get that posted to the frequently asked questions section, we will do so. Make sure we highlight that one, please, because I don't think so. My short answer is I don't think so, but that's really a question for someone else to answer, and we'll get the answer for you.
I'll put it in blue.
Thank you.
When will the principals of these new schools be announced?
They just posted actually very early in the process. We're actually getting better about that. So those positions are actually posted now with the goal of getting some hiring decisions done before the winter break so that they'll be able to start looking at their numbers, start partnering with all the different departments in central office to get ready for the opening of the school. But they are posted now. And that is
Oh.
earlier than normal, I will say. Our district's getting better about getting those principals on board sooner.
All right. Well, Susan, it looks like we've hit the kind of the qualitative segments on all those questions. So looks like they're pretty gassed out. And so, folks, we want to thank you for joining us this evening. Oh, go ahead.
Before you
Go
go,
ahead.
I don't know that I highlighted. I noticed there was a question about timing of things. At one point, when we presented in September, we had hoped that we could get everything to the board by September 12th for a final review and approval. However, they have identified that as the date for their public hearing. So it has been pushed a little bit. So if you got the very, very, very first email on September 3rd, when we started talking, we said that they would be voting on November 12th. That has been adjusted. It'll actually be November 26th. It is technically before the Thanksgiving holiday break, so that means you'll know for sure before we take our Thanksgiving break what the impacts are to your family. That puts a little hitch in our giddy up as technical people because it means we're losing some days for processing. But our goal then would be to reach out to families that first week in December with some information about the stability transfers. So if you are impacted by the plan, you'll know for sure what those impacts are by November 26th. But please, keep in mind that November 12th public hearing is open to the public. Information on how to register for that will be posted to the website sort of week of, like it normally is for most public comment. So if you are interested in participating in that, keep an eye out on the website for that information. But November 26th is the new approval date. Thank you.
Well, folks, thank you very much for being here this evening. We really hope that the session has been informative and that you better understand the recommendations included in the initial draft of the plan. Separately, we really do appreciate your open and honest participation. Your input and feedback is vital to the refinement of the enrollment plan. Please remember, we will present a summary of the feedback that we receive and any recommended adjustments to the proposal to the board on October 15th, with a final vote expected on November 26th. The thought exchange will remain open through September 29. We encourage you to continue to post comments, rate comments, and explore the exchange. Again, thank you, and we hope that you enjoy the remainder of your evening.